just jump into this. We're going to be going after path number 2, engaging in a bigger story, but I want to take a different turn. The first part of the chapter focuses on asking questions. But this is really what I want to talk about, and then we're going to break it down just a little bit. But questions reveal story. Okay? And I'm not just going to say just questions, but we need to have curious questions. See, one of the beauties of remaining childlike is that you have curious questions. Remember, you ever been around, some of you may have kids, but you know, the kids are always like, well, why? But why? How does that work? Why are we doing that? What is that? How come? And they just ask a million questions, curious questions. As we get older, we feel stupid for asking questions as men because we should know. But the truth is, there's loads of things we don't know. And if we can remain in a place of asking curious questions, what it's going to reveal is a bigger story that we are a part of that we don't understand yet. Here's what I mean by that. For those of you that don't know my story, I'm just going to give you like a quick little one piece of it that I mentioned actually in Pathway 2, which is this. My wife and I's marriage like just completely fractured. When we were in 2010, I played at this massive event, the largest event I had ever played with. I was at like it felt like I'm at the peak of what I'm meant to do. This is serving the Lord. This is what it's like. Yes, go, amen. This is my calling, which I'm not a huge fan of that word, but we'll get into that another time. I'm fulfilling my calling. And the next morning, my marriage falls apart. We're sitting with a spiritual father, and he basically sits us down, asks my wife, how are you doing? She says, not good, and then starts sobbing for 4 hours and tells me that I'm basically a piece of crap and that our marriage is a sham and that there was no addiction, no adultery, no nothing. I was a workaholic, and because my workaholism was ministry, everybody applauded me instead of held me accountable. And so I was getting applauded for doing all of this. Instead, my marriage was falling apart. My wife felt rejected, abandoned, and unloved. Now, fast forward, it was about a month later, because this was right before our anniversary. There had been some reconnection. We had done some work. We had had some friends involved, and it wasn't great, but it was good enough for us to go on an anniversary trip, okay? And this is where the story takes a turn and kind of what I'm going into today. For the entire 3 days we were gone, 2 long drives from Southern California, which is about 3 hours into the desert, 3.5 hours into the desert, 3.5 hours back, we spent the entire time asking each other questions about our childhood that ranged from what was your favorite cereal to what was your biggest fear. And I learned 8 years into my marriage more about my wife on that drive than I did the 8 years of marriage combined. Because I never thought a stupid question like, what kind of cereal did you like when you were growing up, would lead to a conversation about how her family viewed health, how her family viewed nutrition, how their family viewed sugar, and what that meant as a child who wasn't allowed or was just given sugar for the sake of making sure that they were subordinate. And all of a sudden, it expanded my reality of what it meant to connect with my wife, because curious questions revealed a bigger story in her life than I knew was even there. And the crazy part is, most men never learn how to ask curious questions to their wives so that they know their story. Now, let's take this away from marriage for a second. The reality is, if I'm not asking myself bigger questions, I don't really know my story. I'm sitting here trying to figure things out, never once thinking that I might be asking the wrong questions. If you are continuing to get the same results and the same answers for a long period of time, it's not because the answers are wrong, it's because the questions are wrong. You need to start asking new questions in your life if you want to understand your story better. Then you can go and do the exact same thing to anybody in your life you say you care about. See, most of us like to go head on, right? Like, this is how men mostly work. We're like in a relationship with our wives, things aren't going good, so we hit the question right on. Like, let's deal with this, bam! Like, let's deal with this thing here, and let's fix it, and let's solve it. Wrong approach, dog. Wrong approach for you, wrong approach for her, wrong approach for connection. This is why conflict resolution doesn't work. They've shown this in studies, you guys. Conflict resolution is the lowest form of has the lowest results of trying to get a couple reconnected again. In fact, the Gottmans did a study of this, and 80% of couples who were going to get divorced, who they taught conflict resolution to, still got divorced. Guess how many, when they taught them how to connect with their spouse, how many got divorced? None. Zero. Because the goal isn't conflict resolution, it's relearning connection through curious questions. Because when I can learn how to ask questions, I can learn more about your story, which means I can finally have empathy. Now, if you bring this personally into your life as a man, if you can learn how to ask questions about yourself and embrace the fullness of your story, now guess who you can have empathy for? You. See, because when I can have empathy for the things I've been through, you guys, a lot of you have heard me say this, grief is the gateway to masculine emotion. If I can finally have empathy for what I've been through, I can finally learn how to grieve, and maybe I won't just get through it, but I'll actually learn from it and I'll be transformed by it. So what is the next step? Okay? The next step is story then reveals, ta-da, beliefs and values. Whoops, L, guys, see? I even have it written under here and I can't spell right. So let's just make this very clear. I think it's my dyslexia just shows way up. I even write it down first and I can't get this shit right. So let's just make that really clear. There's no hope for me in spelling live on a Man Talk Monday, ever. We've been doing this too many years and I still can't spell, okay? But story reveals beliefs and values. See, you think that you're up against a conflict with your wife because of circumstance, or a conflict in your behavior because of circumstance. It's not circumstance. It's not experience. It is your story reveals your beliefs and your values. Beliefs are what I think, okay? Values are what I feel. And if I can begin to understand my story or my wife's story, I will begin to understand what I believe or she believes and what they value, which is why they feel something. I'm going to give you an equation that you need to write down, because this is the equation for all of life right here. Beliefs plus values equals behavior. There it is. That's how it works. Right there. Beliefs plus values equals behavior. It does not work the other way around. You can't mess with this equation. You can't switch, you can't put behavior over here, behavior plus values equals beliefs. No, it does not work like that. Your beliefs and your values will determine your behavior. And what happens is we're trying to get everybody to discipline their behaviors when we should be engaging with our story to reveal our beliefs and values so that our behaviors change naturally. If you've been having trouble in your life changing your behaviors, it's because you're trying to manage out unwanted behaviors instead of going back, asking the questions that reveal your story, that get you to the beliefs and values that are dictating your behavior. Again, I go back to what I said earlier. Ask different questions if you want different results. Ask different questions if you want different results. And the whole part of path 2 is learning how to ask different questions so I can engage with my story more vulnerably, more honestly, so that I can see the transformation I want to see. Now, for those of you that were a part of the archetype series that we did with the Man Talk Monday, which part of the archetype are we dealing with? Can anybody guess? What part of the archetype is going to ask curious questions? Which of the 4? Is it king, warrior, magician, or lover? It's the magician. The magician all day. What we're doing is we're engaging with that magician archetype inside of every man to begin to explore and pull apart. I need to see more. I want to understand. Help me understand. Help me understand. Instead of getting pissed off with yourself or pissed off at the people around you, ask better questions. Ask better questions. Now, I'm going to give you one last thing and then we'll do some questions about this. But all of this allows us to engage with my two favorite words, which you guys know, mystery and tension. Because if you're asking questions, notice I didn't say questions reveal answers. That's what we think. We think that questions are supposed to give us answers because we're supposed to have answers dictate our life. Now, if you're a Christian here and you follow Jesus, it's even more depressing because not once does he say he's the answer, he says he's the way. Because life isn't about a destination, it's about a path you're living on. And when we can embrace the path, we're less concerned about where the path leads because we know we're in the right way. Does that make sense? Is this connecting? Because what I'm trying to give you is that ability to walk into the tension, walk into the hard thing, and offer it questions, not for the sake of answers, but for the sake of learning how to embrace mystery and tension in a way that redirects our beliefs and values into new behaviors to transform our environments, our lives, our marriages, our children, our jobs, our finances, our legacy. Make a list. But it all begins by learning how to ask curious questions so that we can engage with the bigger story that we are a part of. Okay? Now, with that in mind, I want to do a few questions before we do the blessing. Well, let me answer this last question from Reed and then we'll do the blessing and close out tonight. But please go to the community, you guys. This is the best place that we can connect with one another, where we can offer each other like really the care that we're looking for. I know everyone in here needs that, so let's just offer it to one another. So I'm going to give you that. Let me do the blessing. For those of you guys that know the blessing, let me just declare it over you one time through. Second time through, we'll declare it together. So let me declare this over you as we close out. You are the evidence of the strength of your ancestors. There are many things within your lineage that attempted to obliterate all forms of goodness, but you are the living proof that it did not work. Now, I want you to declare this over yourself. I am the evidence of the strength of my ancestors. There are many things within my lineage that attempted to obliterate all forms of goodness. But I am the living proof that it did not work. All right. Good night, you bunch of badasses. I'll see you at Daily Drive tomorrow, and I will see you guys tomorrow morning in the community. Good night.